The feared Duke of Ravenscar married a veiled woman sight unseen, a desperate plain nobody who needed rescue and would demand nothing from his cold heart. But when he finally lifted her veil on their wedding night, what he discovered wasn't what shocked him most. What happens when two people hiding behind carefully constructed masks realize the stranger they married might be the only person who truly sees them? London, 1847. The Ashworth Ballroom glowed with 1,000 candles. Their flames danced in the tall mirrors that covered the walls. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling like frozen waterfalls, throwing rainbow light across the crowd. Everywhere Evangeline looked, she saw silk and jewels and smiling faces. Duchesses wore gowns of deep blue. Young men stood straight in their formal coats. Girls her age laughed behind their fans, hoping someone important would notice them. But Evangeline stood alone, near a marble pillar wrapped in white roses. She kept her back straight like a sword, her hands folded just right at her waist. Her face showed nothing, even though her heart pounded hard in her chest. Her dress was pretty enough, made of pale purple silk with fresh lace at the edges, but it was last year's style. Everyone could see that. The sharp-eyed older women noticed everything. They whispered to each other behind gloved hands. 23 years old and still not married, the whispers followed her everywhere like shadows she could not escape. She had soft brown hair pulled back in simple waves. Her face was pale and delicate. Her eyes were hazel, large and watchful. She was not the kind of pretty that made men stop and stare. She was quiet and easy to miss in crowded rooms. Her skin looked almost see-through, as if she had spent too many years hiding indoors. People said she had been marriageable once, before everything fell apart. Before her father's disgrace, before the scandal that destroyed the family name. Now she was just tolerated. Poor made her invisible in a special way. 3 younger sisters waited at home in their small, crumbling house. Their futures rested on Evangeline's shoulders like iron chains. Her mother grew weaker with each passing winter. The men who lent them money came closer and closer to their door. Evangeline had learned to make herself small, to stay quiet, to never ask for anything. She accepted invitations to parties like this one and always said thank you. She danced when someone asked, but never looked like she enjoyed it. She had become very good at being present, but somehow absent at the same time. There, but not really seen. Yet tonight, something felt different. She felt someone watching her with eyes that cut right through her careful mask. Across the ballroom stood a man who made everyone else seem smaller. Alexander Blackwood, the Duke of Ravenscar. His name alone made people nervous. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with dark brown hair swept back from his forehead. His face was all strong lines and sharp angles, a firm jaw, a straight nose, full lips that rarely smiled, and eyes so dark and intense they seemed to see everything. He wore a black formal coat covered in detailed silver embroidery along the collar, a white shirt, an expensive brooch at his throat. Everything about him said power and wealth, but his eyes said something else. They held intelligence and old pain mixed together, the eyes of a man who had seen too much and trusted too little. He stood perfectly still, perfectly controlled, as if he always held himself back from something. He almost never attended parties like this. His estate up north was said to be as cold and unwelcoming as its master. It sat on cliffs above a grey sea that never stopped moving. People said he was ruthless in business, that he never changed his mind, that he chose to live alone. Some whispered he had loved someone once, and it destroyed him. Others said he had no heart at all, and right now he was staring directly at Evangeline. It was not the casual way people's eyes moved across a ballroom, looking for someone interesting. His gaze was focused, sharp, like he could see past her careful composure straight down to the desperation she worked so hard to hide. Evangeline felt naked under that stare, as if all her secrets lay visible on her skin, the unpaid bills hidden in her desk drawer, her mother's medicine bottles, her father's debts that would not die with him. She dropped her eyes, feeling heat flood her pale cheeks. When she dared to look up again, the Duke was moving toward her. He walked with purpose, steady and sure. The crowd parted before him like water. People stepped aside without even thinking about it. Her heart hammered against her ribs so hard she thought everyone must hear it. Whatever this was, whatever he wanted, she knew with absolute certainty that after tonight, nothing would ever be the same. His dark eyes never left her face as he crossed the gleaming floor. The candles made his shadow stretch long behind him. The music seemed to grow quieter, or maybe it was just that all she could hear was the rush of blood in her ears. He stopped 3 feet away from her. Up close, he was even more imposing, even more handsome in that cold, perfect way. His presence filled the space around him, made the air feel heavier. His eyes studied her face with an intensity that made her want to look away, but somehow she could not. "Lady Evangeline Thornbury," he said. His voice was deep and smooth. Not a question, a statement. He knew exactly who she was. She managed a small curtsy, her legs shaking beneath her skirts. "Your Grace?" I require a word with you tomorrow morning. My residence in Mayfair, 10 o'clock. Again, not a question, not a request. A command delivered as calmly as if he were discussing the weather. Before she could respond, before she could ask why or how or what this meant, he turned and walked away. His black coat disappeared into the crowd, and Evangeline was left standing by her pillar, her heart racing, her hands trembling, knowing that tomorrow morning everything would change. The Duke's London house was elegant, but cold. Evangeline sat on the edge of a leather chair in his private study. Her back stayed straight, even though her stomach twisted with nerves. Portraits stared down at her from the walls. Generations of Blackwood ancestors, all with that same severe expression, all those dark eyes watching her. The morning light came through tall windows, making dust particles dance in the air. The room smelled of old books and pipe tobacco and something sharp like ink. She had been summoned here with a heavy cream invitation, the ducal seal pressed into black wax. Her Aunt Millicent dozed in the corner, her head tilted back in an uncomfortable-looking position. A footman had poured her sherry too generously. Now soft snores came from her open mouth. The Duke stood by the window with his back to her. The pale sunlight made his silhouette sharp and dark. Even standing still, he looked powerful. When he finally turned, his dark eyes fixed on her with that same penetrating stare from last night. In daylight, she could see him more clearly. The strong lines of his profile, the breadth of his shoulders, the way he held himself like a soldier, small lines around his eyes that made him look tired. I shall speak plainly, Lady Evangeline. As I despise lies and games, I know your circumstances. His voice was matter-of-fact, cold as winter frost. Heat flooded her face, her pale cheeks turned pink. Your Grace, I don't understand what you mean. He raised one hand. The gesture silenced her immediately. His fingers were long and elegant despite their obvious strength. Your father's debts total £4,000. Your mother requires a physician you cannot afford. You have 3 sisters who will never make good marriages without money for dowries. You face complete ruin within 6 months. Each word fell like a hammer blow. Evangeline's small hands twisted in her lap, crushing the fabric of her modest day dress. Her knuckles turned white. How could you possibly know these things? I make it my business to know things that matter to me. He moved to his desk, pulled out a document. The paper looked official with neat handwriting covering it. I am in need of a wife. She blinked twice, opened her mouth, closed it again. Surely she had not heard him correctly. Her heart began to pound so hard she felt dizzy. Not for the reasons most men seek marriage, he continued. His tone stayed clinical, like he was discussing a business deal, not a lifetime commitment. I require an heir. I require a duchess capable of managing my household. I require someone who understands that this arrangement is one of mutual benefit, not romantic fairy tales or love stories. I don't understand why you would choose me. Her voice came out small and uncertain, barely above a whisper. I am not beautiful like the women you could have. I have no fortune. No important family connections anymore. Something flickered across his face. So fast she almost missed it. You underestimate yourself, Lady Evangeline. You possess a quiet kind of beauty that does not announce itself loudly. More importantly, you are practical. You are desperate enough to agree to my terms without harboring foolish expectations about love and romance. He placed the document on the desk in front of her. I will settle your father's debts completely, every penny. I will provide for your mother's medical care, the finest physicians in London, and I will establish generous dowries for your sisters so they can marry well. In return, you will become the Duchess of Ravenscar. You will perform the duties of that position with competence and discretion. You will not expect affection from me. You will not demand explanations for my absences. You will not attempt to change me or imagine yourself in love with me. Evangeline stared at the paper. The elegant script blurred before her eyes. Tears threatened, but she blinked them back. It was a devil's bargain. Marriage without love, duty without warmth, everything she had once dreamed marriage could be, turned inside out and emptied of all feeling. But what choice did she have? Really, truly, what choice? She thought of Caroline, barely 17 years old, still innocent, still believing in happy endings. She thought of 10-year-old Beatrice, who deserved to keep her laughter and her childhood. She thought of her mother wasting away in a cold, damp bedroom because they could not afford proper medicine or even enough coal for the fire. You make it sound like a prison sentence, she said quietly. Her small hands shook in her lap. His dark eyes studied her for a long moment. I have been told I am not easy to live with, but I am fair. You will have your own rooms, your own money to spend as you wish, freedom to pursue your interests and hobbies. I ask only that you maintain the appearance of a proper marriage when we are in public view, and when we are in private. In private, you need not suffer my presence, unless it is necessary for the production of an heir. How lonely he made it sound. How perfectly, deliberately lonely, like he was building walls around himself on purpose. Evangeline met his eyes, those cold, dark winter eyes, and she saw something she recognized deep inside them. Another person wearing a mask, playing a role, pretending to be something they were not. Maybe they were not so different after all. Maybe they were both prisoners of their circumstances, both doing what they must to survive. "Very well, Your Grace." Her hand trembled only slightly as she reached for the pen he offered. The metal felt cold against her fingers. "I accept your terms." She signed her name with careful precision, each letter formed slowly, deliberately. Evangeline Thornbury. Soon it would be Evangeline Blackwood, Duchess of Ravenscar. Soon she would belong to this cold, severe man with his penetrating gaze and his careful control. As she set down the pen, the Duke's expression remained unchanged. His handsome face stayed an unreadable mask. "The wedding will be arranged for 3 weeks hence, small and private. I will send instructions to your home." She nodded, her throat too tight to speak. Relief and dread and something else mixed together in her chest, something she could not name. As she rose to leave, gathering her skirts and preparing to wake her aunt, his voice stopped her at the door. "Lady Evangeline." He still stood by the window. His face was half in shadow, half in light. The strong line of his jaw was visible in profile. "I will not be unkind to you. That much I can promise. I will not be cruel or deliberately hurtful." It was not love. It was not even affection or warmth or anything close to those things. But in that moment, standing in his cold study with her future signed away on paper, it felt like the only honest thing anyone had offered her in years, the only truth in a world full of pretty lies. She left without responding. Her aunt snorted awake and followed her out. But Evangeline's mind was already racing ahead, to the wedding, to the castle up north, to a life with this mysterious, severe man who needed a wife but not a partner, who wanted an heir but not love, who offered security but not happiness. 3 weeks until everything changed forever. The wedding ceremony was small and somber, nothing like the grand celebrations Evangeline had imagined as a young girl. She stood in the chapel at Ravenscar Castle, surrounded by cold stone walls and stained glass windows. The colored glass threw pools of red and blue and gold light onto the floor. Outside, she could hear the distant crash of waves against rocks. Her wedding gown was unlike anything she had ever worn. The Duke had sent it to her modest townhouse 3 days before the ceremony. It arrived in a large box wrapped in white paper. When she opened it, she gasped. The finest white silk she had ever touched, embroidered with delicate silver thread in patterns that swirled like water. But most striking was the veil. Layer upon layer of sheer white fabric, it covered not just her hair but her entire face. It cascaded down past her waist in elaborate folds. An ornate silver tiara sat on top, encrusted with diamonds that caught the light like tiny stars. She could barely see through all those translucent layers, could barely breathe under their weight. The veil made her into something mysterious, something unknowable, a bride whose face remained hidden even from her groom. Alexander stood beside her in formal attire, a black coat so intricately embroidered with silver thread that it shimmered when he moved, a white shirt beneath, a jeweled brooch at his collar. Then his dark hair was perfectly groomed, his strong features composed and calm. But she saw his jaw tighten when he first saw her veiled form, saw something flicker in his dark eyes that she could not read. The ceremony proceeded with cold efficiency. Vows were exchanged through the layers of fabric covering her mouth. Rings were placed on fingers she could barely see. The priest made pronouncements in a voice that echoed off the stone walls. Through it all, Evangeline remained veiled, her face a mystery even in this most intimate of moments. It felt symbolic somehow. She was becoming his wife, but remaining unknown, unseen, a stranger in bridal white. When the priest declared them married, Alexander stepped forward. His large hands reached for her veil. For one breathless moment, she thought he would lift it, would finally see her face clearly, would seal their union with a kiss like other couples did. But he merely adjusted the fabric, made sure it sat properly on her shoulders, then stepped back. No kiss, no unveiling, just a formal nod of acknowledgement. "My wife," he said quietly. His dark eyes tried to read her expression through the layers of white silk. "Welcome to Ravenscar." The journey to her apartments took them through winding corridors and up stone staircases. Evangeline still wore her veil, still moved through the castle as a shrouded figure, half seen and mysterious. Servants paused in their work to watch the new duchess pass. Their curious eyes tried to penetrate the layers of fabric. Whispers followed in her wake. Mrs. Blackwell waited at the entrance to the duchess's chambers. She was a stern-looking woman of about 50 years, iron-gray hair pulled back tight, a face that looked like it had forgotten how to smile. Her gaze swept over Evangeline's veiled form with undisguised curiosity. "Your Grace?" The title sounded strange coming through the veil, muffled and distant. "Welcome to Ravenscar." The household staff stood in perfect lines, maids in black and white uniforms, footmen standing at attention, the butler whose expression suggested he had seen everything the world had to offer. They all studied her veiled figure with barely hidden fascination. The new Duchess. The Duke's mysterious choice. What could she possibly look like beneath all those layers? What could he possibly see in such an uncertain creature? Evangeline felt their judgment like needles against her skin. But the veil provided strange comfort. They could judge her clothing and her posture, but not her face, not the fear and uncertainty she knew must show in her eyes. Mrs. Blackwell led her through corridors that seemed to stretch forever, past portraits of stern ancestors who glared down from the walls. The air smelled of beeswax and old stone and something she could not name. Age, perhaps, or the weight of all the years this place had stood, watching the sea. "His Grace's chambers are in the East Wing," Mrs. Blackwell said. Her tone was carefully neutral, empty of emotion. "Your apartments are in the West Wing. He felt you would prefer privacy and your own space." Privacy. Such a gentle word for separation, for keeping apart. The Duchess's apartments were unexpectedly beautiful, a suite of rooms overlooking the sea, decorated in shades of cream and gold with touches of soft rose pink. A fire burned welcomingly in the stone fireplace. Fresh flowers stood in crystal vases, their perfume sweet against the salt air that crept through the windows. "If you require anything, you need only ring this bell." Mrs. Blackwell pointed to a velvet pull cord. "Dinner is served at 8 o'clock. His Grace keeps country hours here." Then she was gone. The heavy door closed, and Evangeline stood alone in the silence of her new domain. Finally, she reached up with trembling hands, began to remove the veil. Layer after layer of sheer fabric fell away, pooling at her feet like clouds. She removed the heavy tiara, set it carefully on the dressing table where it glittered in the firelight. Free of the veil, she moved to the window, pressed her palm against the cool glass. Below, the sea crashed against rocks with relentless fury, wild and angry and free. She studied her reflection in the glass, her soft brown hair now disheveled from the veil, her pale face wan with exhaustion, her hazel eyes uncertain and afraid. This was who she truly was, not the mysterious veiled bride, just Evangeline, plain, unremarkable Evangeline. She had never felt so far from everything familiar, from everyone she loved. This castle with its cold stone and endless corridors, this wild place with its angry sea, this marriage to a man who did not want love. It was exile dressed in silk and jewels. A knock at the door startled her, made her jump. "Enter!" she called, expecting a maid with towels or tea. Instead, the Duke himself stood in the doorway, still in his wedding finery. His dark eyes widened slightly at seeing her unveiled for the first time since the ceremony, truly seeing her face without layers of fabric obscuring it. He looked tired, lines of weariness etched around those intense eyes that she had not noticed before. "I wanted to ensure you arrived safely to your rooms." His voice was formal, distant, but his gaze lingered on her features, her delicate bone structure, the way her hair caught the firelight, the vulnerability in her wide eyes. "I did. Thank you for your concern." She clasped her hands together, uncertain of what to do, what to say. Were wives supposed to curtsy to their husbands in private? Nothing had prepared her for this strange reality. He moved into the room. His presence immediately filled the space, made it feel smaller somehow, up close, without the veil between them. She was even more aware of his striking appearance, the strong planes of his face, the intensity of his dark eyes, the barely controlled power in his movements. "The veil," he said abruptly. "It is tradition in my family. The Duchess of Ravenscar wears it at her wedding, covering her face until she enters her new home. It symbolizes the mystery of marriage, the unknown future that lies ahead." He paused, his jaw tightened. "I should have explained this beforehand. I apologize if it caused you distress." "It was symbolic," she agreed softly. "I felt hidden, protected perhaps, but also unseen, unknown." "You are seen now." His gaze held hers. Something unguarded flickered in his expression. "I see you, Evangeline." The use of her given name, spoken in his deep voice, sent unexpected warmth flooding through her. His gaze took in the flowers. The fire burning bright, the careful arrangements throughout the room. "Mrs. Blackwell tends toward coldness and empty rooms. I instructed her to make your chambers comfortable, welcoming. If anything is not to your liking, you need only say so." "It's beautiful," Evangeline interrupted. "Truly beautiful. More than I expected or deserve." Their eyes met across the space between them. For a moment, something unguarded crossed his expression. Relief, perhaps, or gratitude that she had not complained, had not wept, had not made demands on this their wedding day. "The sea can be loud at night," he said quietly. "The waves crash constantly against the rocks below. If it disturbs your sleep, I can arrange other chambers further inside the castle." "No," the word came quickly, surprising them both. "I like it. The sound. It sounds like freedom." His expression shifted, softened almost imperceptibly. "Yes, that is exactly why I chose these rooms for you. I thought you might appreciate that sound." He turned to leave, then paused at the threshold, looked back at her unveiled face, her uncertain eyes, her small hands twisted together. "Evangeline," her given name, in his voice sounded strange, intimate in a way that made her heart beat faster. "I know this is not what you dreamed of as a girl, but I hope in time you might find some measure of contentment here, some small happiness." Before she could respond, he was gone. The door closed softly behind him. Evangeline stood alone once more, but somehow the silence felt less heavy, less oppressive. She returned to the window, watched darkness gather over the wild sea. In the glass's reflection, she saw herself no longer the mysterious veiled bride, no longer Lady Evangeline Thornbury, desperate and afraid, but the Duchess of Ravenscar with her face finally revealed. She was not certain who that woman would become, but for the first time she thought she might like to discover her. 3 weeks passed, like water finding its course. At first strange and hesitant, then gradually settling into patterns that felt almost natural, almost comfortable in their predictable rhythm. Evangeline rose early each morning, drawn by the dawn light over the sea. She breakfasted alone in the small dining room, while watching the sky turn from grey to pink to gold. Then spent her mornings learning the rhythms of the household, how many servants worked in the castle, when the bread was baked, where the linens were stored, what needed ordering from town. Mrs. Blackwell had been skeptical at first. The housekeeper watched the new Duchess with narrow eyes and pursed lips, but she began to thaw when she discovered Evangeline actually cared about things that mattered. Whether the scullery maid's injured hand had healed properly, if the footman's sick mother was improving, whether the servants had warm enough quarters for winter. "Her Grace is not what I expected," Evangeline overheard Mrs. Blackwell tell the butler one afternoon. "Few things are," came the cryptic reply. The Duke maintained his distance. But it was not the cruel absence she had feared. He appeared at dinner each evening promptly at 8 o'clock. They shared the meal in a silence that gradually became less uncomfortable, less heavy with unspoken words. She found herself studying him across the polished table, and the way candlelight emphasized the strong lines of his face. How his dark eyes would occasionally lift to meet hers with unexpected intensity, the elegant way his large hands moved when he gestured while speaking. He asked about her day. She inquired about his estate business. The conversations were stilted at first, like dancers learning unfamiliar steps, but slowly, carefully they found a rhythm that worked. One afternoon, Evangeline discovered the library. She had been exploring the castle, opening doors, learning the layout of her new home. When she pushed open the heavy oak door, she gasped. The room was magnificent. Floor-to-ceiling shelves filled with leather-bound volumes, ladders on brass rails to reach the highest shelves. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating dust motes that danced like tiny sprites in the golden light. The smell of old paper and leather was intoxicating, beautiful beyond words. She was examining a first edition of Paradise Lost, running her fingers carefully over the worn cover when she sensed his presence behind her. "You appreciate Milton?" The Duke stood in the doorway, still in his riding clothes, mud on his boots, his dark hair slightly windswept, his face flushed from exercise. He looked younger like this, less severe and controlled. "I do, though I confess I have always preferred the poetry in Book 4, Satan's Speech in Eden." She returned the volume carefully to its place. "There's something heartbreaking about it, the way he recognizes beauty but can no longer participate in it. How love becomes torture when you believe yourself unworthy of receiving it." She had not meant to speak so openly, to reveal so much about her own feelings. Heat crept up her pale neck, turning her cheeks pink. But the Duke moved deeper into the library, his tall frame and commanding presence somehow filling the vast space. "Most readers focus on the battles, the theological arguments about good and evil. You find the emotional truth buried beneath the surface. Is that wrong of me?" "It is rare. Most people miss what truly matters." He pulled a volume from a shelf with the practiced ease of someone who knew every inch of this room, every book in its proper place. "I rebuilt this library after a fire destroyed my father's collection. He kept military histories, hunting journals, books about conquest and dominion and power. I chose differently when I replaced them. He handed her the book. It was a collection of sonnets by Elizabeth Barrett Browning. His fingers brushed hers briefly in the exchange, warm and solid and real. Poetry? She could not hide her surprise, looked up at his striking face with new curiosity, new questions forming in her mind. I would not have thought a duke would read love poetry. That a cold-hearted duke reads love poetry? A hint of dark humor touched his voice, softened the severe line of his mouth. I contain contradictions, as do we all. We are not simple creatures easily understood. Evangeline opened the book carefully. The pages were well worn, margins annotated in decisive handwriting, strong slashing strokes of ink. He had read these poems many times, she realized, had marked passages that moved him. The revelation felt intimate, as if she had glimpsed something private and precious. How do I love thee? Let me count the ways, she read softly. These are words written by a woman to a man. Do you not find them presumptuous, too forward and bold? I find them honest. He moved to the window, his profile sharp against the light, the strong nose, the full lips, the determined jaw. Mrs. Browning wrote them knowing her love was returned, knowing she was safe to express such feelings. That is not presumption, that is courage. And if love is not returned, what then happens to such words? The question hung between them, heavy with meaning. When he turned back, his dark eyes held something raw and undefended, something that made her breath catch in her throat. Then the poems become epitaphs, beautiful monuments to what never was and never could be, reminders of loss and pain. She understood suddenly that they were no longer discussing literature, no longer talking about dead poets and old books. Whatever wound he carried, whatever had made him into this isolated, guarded man, it involved love, or the death of it. Your Grace, she said gently, taking a tentative step closer, may I ask what happened? What made you so certain that affection is a dangerous delusion to be avoided? For a long moment, he did not answer. The clock in the corner ticked away seconds that felt like hours. She could see the tension in his broad shoulders, the way his hands clenched and unclenched at his sides, the battle happening behind his eyes. I was engaged once, he finally said, his voice carefully controlled, flat and emotionless. Lady Cecilia Ashworth, beautiful, charming, everything society deemed perfect in a woman. Our wedding was planned, invitations sent to hundreds of guests. 2 weeks before the ceremony, she eloped with my younger brother, not for love, but because he had just inherited a fortune from our aunt. She wanted security and status. I was merely the means to achieve it, a tool to be used and discarded. He paused, his jaw tightened visibly. My brother died in a riding accident within a year, drank too much, took foolish risks, could not face what he had done. She attempted to return to me then, claimed it had all been a terrible mistake, a moment of confusion. She expected forgiveness, expected I would still marry her as if nothing had happened. And did you? Evangeline whispered, her hazel eyes wide with sympathy and growing understanding. I sent her away with a generous financial settlement and instructions never to contact me again, ever. His gaze met hers, fierce and uncompromising, his dark eyes burning with old pain that had never fully healed. I learned then that romantic love is a fiction we tell ourselves, a pleasant story with no basis in reality. People act from self-interest, always. The sooner one accepts that truth, the less one suffers disappointment. So you chose me, Evangeline said slowly, understanding dawning like sunrise. Because I cannot hurt you the way she did. Because our arrangement is honest about what it is. Because I am not beautiful enough to bewitch you, not charming enough to deceive you. You are more beautiful than you know, he said quietly, surprising them both with the admission. His eyes traced her delicate features. The soft curve of her cheek, the intelligence in her eyes, the graceful line of her neck. But yes, I chose you because you are honest. Because you signed a contract without false declarations of love. Because you understand that this is a practical arrangement built on mutual need, not romantic fantasy. Evangeline moved closer, still holding the book of sonnets, drawn by something she could not name. Alexander, his given name felt strange on her tongue, intimate. You have been kind to me, kinder than our agreement required. You ensured my mother receives the finest medical care. You provided dowries that will make my sister's future secure. You gave me these beautiful rooms, this library, space to breathe and be myself. That is not the behavior of a man incapable of caring about others. He looked at her with something like wonder and fear mixed together, his handsome face suddenly vulnerable in a way she had never witnessed. I do not wish to care, Evangeline. Caring leads to pain, to disappointment, to betrayal. And isolation leads to what? A magnificent prison with sea views and empty rooms? A sound escaped him, not quite a laugh, but close. You are more perceptive than is comfortable for me. I have had practice seeing past facades and masks. We perform our roles very well, you and I. But perhaps in private, we might be allowed to be simply ourselves, to let down our guards just a little. The air between them felt charged. Trembling with possibility, he took a step closer, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes, close enough that she could see the faint stubble along his jaw, the tiny scar above his left eyebrow, the way his pupils grew larger as he looked at her. And who is yourself, Evangeline, the obedient Duchess? Or someone else entirely? Someone I have not yet met? I am still discovering her, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. But I think she is braver than the woman who signed your contract 3 weeks ago. This place, this strange new life, it is teaching me that I am more than the sum of my family's disappointments and failures. His hand rose, as if to touch her face. His fingers hovered just inches from her cheek. She could feel the warmth radiating from his skin. Then his hand fell back to his side. He stepped away, rebuilding the careful distance between them. You were never a disappointment. You were a diamond trapped in mud, waiting for the right circumstances to reveal your true worth. The compliment, so unexpected and sincere, stole her breath, made her pale cheeks flush with color. The dinner gong will sound soon, he said, his voice rougher than usual, stepping further back as if he did not trust himself to stay close. You may borrow any books you wish. The library is yours as much as mine. Everything here is yours now. He left before she could respond, but Evangeline stood holding the sonnets, her heart beating with an unfamiliar rhythm, a new kind of hope taking root in her chest. Something had shifted between them, fragile as new ice, but real nonetheless. ICT 5. Intrusion from the past. The letter arrived on a grey morning when the sky hung low and heavy over the sea. The butler carried it on a silver tray. His face more stern than usual, his expression suggested he knew the contents would bring trouble. Lady Cecilia Ashworth requests the honor of calling upon the Duke and Duchess of Ravenscar. Evangeline read it twice. Her stomach tightened with each word. She knew that name. Alexander had spoken it only once. But it had burned itself into her memory. The woman who had betrayed him, who had turned love into something twisted and cruel, who had destroyed his ability to trust. Shall I inform His Grace? The butler inquired, his voice carefully neutral. No, I mean, yes, of course. Evangeline's small hands trembled as she set down the letter. Where is His Grace currently? In his study, Your Grace. She found Alexander surrounded by account books and correspondence, his sleeves rolled up, revealing strong forearms. Ink staining his elegant fingers. He looked up at her entrance and something in his expression softened, the way it had begun to do recently when she appeared, his dark eyes warming perceptibly. Cecilia has written, she said without greeting or preamble. She wishes to call on us here. The softness vanished instantly, replaced by something cold and hard as winter steel. His jaw clenched, a muscle ticked in his cheek. Absolutely not. She is not welcome in this house. She is already on her way. The letter says she arrives this afternoon. He stood abruptly, the chair scraped harshly against the wood floor, his full height and breadth suddenly imposing, threatening. Then she will be turned away at the door, sent back to wherever she came from. Alexander. Evangeline moved closer, drawn by an instinct she did not fully understand, her pale hand reaching out tentatively. Perhaps it is better to receive her, to show her that her power to wound you has ended, that you have moved past what she did. His laugh was bitter, sharp as broken glass. You think her powerless. You do not know her as I do. I think she is desperate, or she would not come uninvited after all these years. Evangeline surprised herself with her own certainty, lifting her chin. Let me meet her. Let me stand beside you as your wife. Together we can face her and close this chapter of your past forever. He studied her for a long moment, conflict playing across his handsome features, the tightness around his eyes, the way his lips pressed together, the tension in his broad shoulders. Finally he nodded. Very well, but I warn you, Cecilia is charming and manipulative and utterly ruthless. She will see you as an obstacle to be removed, a problem to be solved. Then she will be disappointed. Lady Cecilia Ashworth arrived in a cloud of expensive perfume and rustling taffeta. She swept into the drawing room like a queen entering her court. She was indeed beautiful, golden curls artfully arranged to frame her face, porcelain skin without a single blemish, rosebud lips arranged in a practiced smile, a voluptuous figure displayed to advantage in a gown of striking emerald green. Everything about her was calculated for maximum effect, from the artful tear in her bright blue eye to the trembling of her gloved hand. She was the kind of beauty that announced itself loudly, that demanded attention and admiration from everyone in the room. "Alexander," she extended that hand as if expecting him to kiss it. Her voice honey-sweet and familiar, intimate in a way that made Evangeline's stomach turn. "How good of you to receive me after all this time." He did not take her hand. His face remained an unreadable mask. "Lady Cecilia, may I present my wife, the Duchess of Ravenscar." Cecilia's calculating gaze slid to Evangeline. For just an instant something cruel flashed in those china blue eyes before the mask of sweetness returned. She took in Evangeline's plain day dress, her simple hairstyle, her pale, uncertain face, her small frame that seemed to shrink under such scrutiny. "How charming. I had heard you had married. Some little nobody from London," they said, practically ruined and desperate. Her eyes raked over Evangeline with barely concealed disdain, with pity mixed with contempt. "Plain little thing, isn't she? But I told everyone. Alexander always had such a generous heart, always willing to rescue poor unfortunate creatures who have nowhere else to turn." The words were poison wrapped in honey, sweet-sounding but deadly. Evangeline felt their sting, felt them cut deep. But she refused to flinch, kept her spine straight despite the heat flooding her cheeks. "You are too kind, Lady Cecilia. Won't you sit and take tea with us?" They arranged themselves in the drawing room like chess pieces on a board, Cecilia on the settee, positioning herself to best display her curves and her beauty. Alexander standing by the fireplace with rigid formality, his tall frame tense as a drawn bow ready to release. Evangeline pouring tea with steady hands, though her heart raced like a frightened rabbit. "I have come because I could not bear the distance between us any longer," Cecilia began. She accepted the teacup without drinking, her eyes fixed on Alexander with practiced adoration, with longing that looked almost real. "Alexander, we were so much to each other once. Surely we can at least be friends now. Surely you can forgive one mistake made in youth." "No," he said flatly, his voice ice and stone. "You hold a grudge for one youthful mistake. One moment of poor judgment?" She set down the cup with a delicate clink, the sound sharp in the quiet room. "I was young and confused. Your brother was so insistent, so persuasive. I made a terrible error in judgment. I have lived with that regret every single day since. It haunts my dreams." "You made a choice," Alexander countered, his voice cold enough to freeze water, his dark eyes hard as flint. "You chose money over honor. You chose status over integrity. You humiliated my family and destroyed my brother's happiness in the process. That is not a youthful mistake. That is calculated cruelty, deliberate betrayal." Cecilia's mask slipped slightly, irritation flashing across her beautiful features. "Your brother was weak. He killed himself with drink and reckless behavior because he could not face what he had done. That is not my fault." She turned to Evangeline with false sympathy, her smile venomous beneath its sweetness. "You see what you have married, my dear. A man who cannot forgive, who nurses wounds like precious treasures. He will never love you. He is incapable of it. And truly, can you blame him? Look at you, mousy and meek and utterly forgettable. You're no replacement for what he lost. You're just a pale shadow." "That is enough." Alexander moved forward, his presence suddenly dangerous, his imposing frame radiating barely controlled fury. "You will leave my house immediately and never return." "But I have nowhere to go." The tears came now, streaming down her porcelain cheeks, genuine or expertly performed, impossible to tell. "I am alone, penniless. The settlement you gave me is gone, spent long ago. I hoped you might remember what we once meant to each other, that you might show mercy to someone who once held your heart. Surely I am more deserving than this pale shadow of a woman you've shackled yourself to." "What we once meant," Alexander's laugh was harsh, bitter as old medicine. "We meant nothing to each other, Cecilia. That was the lesson you taught me so effectively, and I am grateful for it now, because it brought me to this moment, to this life." He moved to stand behind Evangeline's chair. His large hand came to rest on her shoulder, a gesture of solidarity that sent warmth flooding through her entire body, anchoring her in place. She could feel the strength in his touch, the protectiveness. "My wife," he continued, his voice ringing with conviction, his dark eyes blazing with emotion she had never seen before. "My wife has shown me more genuine kindness and integrity in 2 months than you displayed in 2 years. She asks for nothing except honesty. She performs her duties with grace and competence. She has earned the respect of every person in this household through merit, not manipulation. Whatever I am capable or incapable of feeling, it will never again be wasted on you. That part of my life is dead and buried. Cecilia's beautiful face contorted with rage, her mask finally shattering completely like dropped porcelain. You have replaced me with a dowdy, desperate nobody, this plain little mouse who married you for your money? She cannot compare to me in beauty, in breeding, in anything that truly matters to society. Yes, I married him for security, Evangeline said quietly, rising to face her, drawing strength from Alexander's presence behind her, from his hand still resting on her shoulder. I have never pretended otherwise. I have never lied about my circumstances or my reasons. But I have also come to respect him, to value his intelligence and integrity. I have learned that he is far more than the cold Duke society imagines him to be. He is thoughtful and generous and capable of great feeling, but only for those who prove themselves worthy of his trust. She took a step forward, her small frame suddenly radiating quiet power, quiet certainty. You proved yourself unworthy, Lady Cecilia. You showed him that your beauty was only surface deep, that beneath it lay only selfishness and greed and calculation. All the beauty in the world cannot hide the ugliness of a mercenary heart. You measure worth in gold curls and blue eyes and curves displayed for advantage like merchandise. But true beauty lies in character, in loyalty, in the courage to be honest, even when dishonesty would be more profitable or comfortable. The silence that followed was absolute, complete. Even the fire seemed to stop crackling. Cecilia gathered herself with visible effort, her beautiful facade cracking further, revealing the desperation and malice beneath like rot beneath pretty paint. You will regret this, both of you. I know things about this family, secrets that could destroy the Blackwood name if revealed, dark things hidden for generations. Then share them, Alexander said coldly, his hand squeezing Evangeline's shoulder in support. Announce them from the rooftops. Print them in every newspaper in London. I no longer care what society thinks of my family name. My wife has taught me that there are more important things than reputation, things like honesty, loyalty, and the courage to build something real rather than maintain a beautiful illusion built on lies. Defeated, Cecilia swept toward the door, her dignity in tatters despite her striking beauty. At the threshold, she turned back one final time, her blue eyes venomous, filled with hatred and jealousy. You deserve each other, she spat. Two damaged, desperate people playing at happiness. He will never truly see you, never truly want you. You will always know you were second choice, the consolation prize for a broken man who could not have what he really wanted. Then she was gone, the door slamming behind her with enough force to rattle the windows. Evangeline sank into her chair, suddenly exhausted, her small frame trembling with reaction. Alexander remained standing, his hand still on her shoulder, and she felt it trembling slightly, could feel the tension radiating from his tall frame. I apologize, he said hoarsely, his voice thick with emotion. I should never have subjected you to that woman's cruelty. You did not subject me. We faced it together. She covered his large hand with her small one. And we prevailed. We won. He moved to kneel before her chair, taking both her hands in his, engulfing them with his warmth and strength. His dark eyes were bright with emotion, gratitude and something deeper, something he seemed afraid to name. You defended me, he said wonderingly, his handsome face open and vulnerable in a way she had never witnessed. You called me thoughtful and generous. You stood up to her beauty and confidence without flinching or backing down. Because you are thoughtful and generous, because her beauty is meaningless when it houses such cruelty and emptiness. Evangeline squeezed his hands. Cecilia was wrong about you, Alexander. Wrong about so many things, and wrong about me, too. I may not have golden curls or porcelain skin or her figure, but I have strength she will never possess. Strength I am only now discovering. You do, his gaze held hers intensely. You have a quiet strength that does not announce itself loudly, but proves itself through action. You have beauty that rewards those who take time to truly see, and you have integrity that makes her calculated charms look cheap and hollow in comparison. And were you wrong? His grip tightened on her hands, his thumbs stroking her knuckles gently, creating small circles of warmth. When you signed that contract, you believed you were marrying a cold, heartless man. Have I proven otherwise? Evangeline met his gaze steadily, seeing past the severe features to the vulnerable man beneath. You have proven that hearts can be guarded without being dead, that walls can be built for protection without being prisons. and that sometimes the most practical arrangements can become the foundation for something extraordinary and unexpected. Evangeline, her name was almost a prayer on his lips. I did not expect this. I did not imagine that you would become. But whatever he might have confessed was interrupted by a commotion in the entrance hall. Raised voices, the sound of horses arriving at speed, urgent footsteps running through the corridors. A footman burst into the drawing room, his face pale, propriety forgotten in his haste. Your Grace, a messenger from London, your mother, my lady. She has taken ill, very ill. They fear she may not survive the night. Evangeline was on her feet before he finished speaking, her face draining of all color. I must go to her, immediately. Right now. Of course. Alexander was already moving, decisive and commanding, his military bearing taking over. I'll order the fastest horses. We can reach London in— No, she stopped him with a hand on his strong arm. You have a state business that cannot wait. Tenants depending on you. I will go. I must go alone. Not alone. I will send Mrs. Blackwell, footman for protection. Alexander, she smiled despite her fear, despite the tears threatening to fall. I am not the same woman who arrived here 2 months ago. I am not the plain, uncertain girl who signed your contract in your London study. I can do this. I must do this. For myself, as much as for my mother. He looked at her with fierce pride and equally fierce reluctance, his dark eyes searching her face as if memorizing every detail, every line and curve. Then go! But know that I— He stopped, whatever confession hovering on his lips retreating once more. Know that you carry my full support with you. Whatever you need, whatever resources or money or help, it is yours. Everything I have is yours. She squeezed his hand once, marveling at how right it felt in hers, how perfectly they fit together, then released it. As she hurried toward the door, she glanced back to find him still standing there, his tall frame rigid with tension, watching her with an expression that made her heart ache with feelings she dared not yet name. The life she had carefully constructed at Ravenscar, fragile and new and unexpectedly precious, was about to be tested, and she was terrified she might not survive its unraveling. London seemed smaller somehow after the wild expanse of Ravenscar, dirtier too, more cramped and suffocating. Evangeline's carriage rattled through familiar streets that now felt foreign, like visiting a place from a dream half remembered. It pulled up before the modest townhouse that had once been home, the place where she had grown up feeling trapped and afraid. The house looked shabbier than she remembered, paint peeling from the window frames, steps worn down in the middle from years of use. But inside, everything was transformed. New carpets soft beneath her feet, fresh wallpaper in cheerful patterns, fires burning warmly in every grate. The Duke's money, his promise, kept without her even asking. Her mother lay in a proper bed with clean linens that smelled of lavender, attended by a private physician who looked up at Evangeline's entrance with professional gravity, with the serious expression doctors wore when things were bad but not hopeless. Your Grace! Even the doctor seemed surprised by her transformation, from desperate spinster to duchess. Lady Thornbury's condition is serious but stable. Her lungs are badly compromised, weakened by years of damp and cold, but with continued care and rest, there is real hope for recovery. Her mother's eyes fluttered open, taking in Evangeline with surprise and wonder. Evie, is it really you? You look so different. I'm here, Mama. Evangeline took her mother's frail hand, shocked by how thin it had become, how the bones felt like bird wings beneath the papery skin. Look at you, so elegant, so assured and confident. Her mother's smile was weak but genuine, real happiness shining through the pain. You have changed, my darling. There is something brighter about you, as if you were a lamp with the glass finally cleaned. You stand taller, your eyes hold confidence they never had before. You look like you finally believe in yourself. Over the following days, Evangeline managed the household with a competence that surprised even herself. She coordinated care schedules with the nurses, consulted with physicians about treatments and medicines, managed accounts with the practical skill she had learned from observing Alexander, from watching how he ran his vast estate with precision and fairness. Her sisters flocked around her like birds, marveling at the transformation, at the fine duchess she had become. You're different, Evie, Caroline said, studying her older sister with open curiosity, with new respect. You were always kind and good, but now you're strong, certain of yourself. You give orders and people listen. The Duke must treat you well, young Beatrice added innocently, her eyes wide and curious. Evangeline felt warmth flood through her at the mention of Alexander, his dark, intense eyes, his rare smiles that transformed his whole face, the way his hand had felt on her shoulder when he defended her to Cecilia. He does, she said softly, a smile playing at her lips. better than I dared hope, better than I deserve. But not everyone welcomed her transformation. Not everyone was happy to see her rise from poverty to power. On her fourth day in London, Lady Ashworth called during visiting hours. She swept in with her usual group of gossips and social judges, women who made their living from tearing others down, clearly expecting the same meek, grateful Evangeline she remembered. The pale, shrinking creature who had stood by pillars at parties, hoping not to be noticed, hoping to disappear into the wallpaper. "My dear Duchess," the title dripped with false warmth, with mockery barely concealed. "We simply had to call and welcome you back to civilization. It must be terribly trying being buried alive in Northumberland with that dreadful, gloomy Duke. Such a severe man, so cold and harsh. And they say he chose you out of pity, poor dear. Because no one else would have you," the other ladies tittered, hungry for scandal, their eyes raking over Evangeline's simple dress, looking for cracks in her composure, for signs of the desperate girl she used to be. Evangeline set down her teacup with careful precision. Her hands did not tremble, her voice did not waver. "I find his grace neither dreadful nor gloomy, Lady Ashworth, nor is Ravenscar a burial. It is the first place I have ever felt truly alive and free to be myself." A flutter of surprise rippled through the room like wind through wheat. "Come now," Lady Ashworth pressed, sensing weakness, leaning forward with predatory interest, like a cat spotting a wounded mouse. "Surely you can confide among friends here. We all know the marriage was one of convenience, a business arrangement. The poor Duke having to settle for, well, beggars cannot be choosers, can they? He needed an heir, and you needed rescuing from poverty. At least you were sensible enough to accept your place and be grateful for it." Something inside Evangeline broke free, something that had been growing stronger through months of managing a great household, of standing up to Cecilia's cruelty, of earning respect through merit rather than beauty or birth, through actual work and care rather than pretty words. "You mistake the situation entirely." She rose, drawing herself to full height, her small frame somehow commanding the room, filling it with presence and authority. "I did not trap the Duke into an unhappy arrangement. He chose me specifically because I possessed qualities he valued: intelligence, integrity, the ability to see beyond surface appearances to what truly matters. While you and women like you were measuring worth by beauty and bloodlines, he recognized something far more valuable: character, honesty, strength of spirit." Lady Ashworth's face mottled with color, red blotches appearing on her powdered cheeks. "How dare you speak to me in such a— No, how dare you?" Evangeline's voice remained calm. But it carried the authority of a duchess now, not a desperate spinster begging for scraps. Her hazel eyes flashed with conviction and certainty. "You have made a career of elevating the shallow and mocking the substantial, of praising the pretty and dismissing the worthy. You dismissed me as unworthy because my father fell into debt, as if financial misfortune were a moral failing, a sign of bad character. Yet half the families you champion are drowning in secret debts while maintaining pretty facades. The difference is that I faced my circumstances with honesty, while they lie and pretend and hide behind false smiles." The room had gone utterly silent, everyone frozen in shock. "The Duke of Ravenscar is a man of principle, intelligence, and unexpected kindness. He has created a home where people are judged by their merit, not their pedigree or their looks, where worth is measured by actions, not appearances. I am proud to be his Duchess, and I pity anyone too blind to see the value in what we have built together, too shallow to recognize real worth when they see it." She moved to the door, opening it with pointed finality. "Now, if you will excuse me, I have a mother to tend and a household to manage. Unlike some, I do not have unlimited time for idle gossip and shallow judgments about people you barely know." They left in a flurry of offended dignity, their whispers already spreading through London's drawing rooms like poison in water. Evangeline knew she had made enemies. The old Evangeline would have been terrified, desperate to apologize, to smooth ruffled feathers and make everyone like her again. But she was not the old Evangeline anymore. That girl had died somewhere between signing a contract and discovering her own strength. That evening, as she sat by her mother's bedside reading aloud from a novel, a letter arrived bearing the Ravenscar seal. Her hands trembled, not with fear but with anticipation, as she opened it with careful fingers. "Evangeline, I have heard reports from London. It seems you have scandalized half of society by defending my character with rather forceful eloquence. Mrs. Blackwell's cousin witnessed the entire scene and wrote immediately with every detail, quite entertained by the whole affair. I find myself torn between mortification that you felt compelled to defend me and an unfamiliar sensation that I believe might be pride. You stood your ground against people who once intimidated you. You spoke truth when silence would have been easier and safer. You chose integrity over acceptance. These are not the actions of someone performing duties out of obligation. These are the actions of someone who has discovered her own strength and refuses to diminish it for others' comfort. Your mother improves daily, according to Dr. Harrison's reports. I am grateful beyond words, but I confess, and this admission costs me more than you know, that I am impatient for your return. Not because the household requires you, though it does, not because propriety demands it, though it does, because I miss you. There. The words are written and cannot be recalled. The library feels empty without you. Dinners are solitary and joyless, just me and my thoughts. Even the sea seems quieter without you here to claim you love its wildness. I have discovered that my carefully constructed solitude, which once felt like protection and safety, now feels merely like loneliness. I find myself remembering things, the way you tilt your head when considering a question, how your eyes light with intelligence when we discuss books and ideas, the soft sound of your voice in the morning. Your absence has made me realize that what began as a practical arrangement has become something I cannot quite name but desperately need. I do not know what we are becoming, you and I. I only know that when you left, you took something essential with you, and I want it back. I want you back. Return when you are able. The castle awaits its duchess, and I await my wife. Yours, Alexander. Evangeline read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her pale cheeks. Not tears of sorrow, but of recognition, of joy. What had begun as a practical arrangement had transformed into something neither of them had intended, something real and precious and terrifyingly fragile. Her mother's voice, weak but knowing, broke through her thoughts. You love him? Evangeline started to protest, then stopped. Her hand pressed the letter against her heart. Yes, God help me, I do. I love him completely. And he loves you, if that letter is any indication, if those words mean anything. Her mother smiled, reached out to touch her daughter's face with trembling fingers. You have blossomed, my darling. You were always beautiful to those who truly saw you, but now you see it yourself. You believe in your own worth. That makes all the difference in the world. Not yet, Mama. Evangeline folded the letter carefully, tucked it into her bodice where she could feel it against her skin, against her racing heart. Not until I'm certain you're truly recovering and out of danger. But soon I'll go home. Home. Ravenscar had become home. The castle with its wild sea and endless corridors. And Alexander, complicated and wounded and impossibly dear Alexander with his dark eyes and rare smiles, had become her heart, her future, her everything. Act 7, Truth Revealed. Evangeline returned to Ravenscar on a storm-torn evening. The sea raged against the cliffs as if celebrating her arrival. Thunder rumbled across the dark sky. Lightning split the clouds, illuminating the castle in brief, brilliant flashes. She had sent no word ahead, wanting to surprise him, wanting to see his unguarded reaction when she walked through the door. The butler opened the great oak doors with poorly concealed relief. His usually stoic face broke into an actual smile. Your Grace. His Grace has been, that is, he will be most pleased you have returned safely. Where is he? Her heart pounded with anticipation, with need. The library, Your Grace. He has been spending every evening there since you left, in the chair where you used to sit. Evangeline's heart swelled at the image. She hurried through the corridors she now knew by heart, her cloak still damp with rain, her hair escaping its pins in wild tendrils, not caring about propriety or appearance or what anyone thought. She burst through the library doors without knocking, without announcing herself. Alexander stood by the window where she had first found him reading poetry, silhouetted against lightning-streaked sky, his tall frame rigid with tension. He turned at her entrance, and his expression, the raw, undefended joy that blazed across his handsome face before he could mask it, the way his dark eyes lit with relief and longing, told her everything she needed to know. You're back! His voice was rough, barely controlled, as if he had been holding his breath for days and could finally exhale. I'm back! She moved toward him, drawn like a compass to true north, like a river flowing to the sea, her small frame trembling with emotion and anticipation. I received your letter. I should not have sent it. It was improper, presumptuous, revealing too much too soon. It was honest. She stopped before him. Close enough to see his pulse beating rapidly in his throat, close enough to count the flecks in his dark eyes, close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body. It was brave. It was everything I needed to hear, everything I hoped to hear. Evangeline. Her name was a prayer and a question and a confession all at once. His hands clenched at his sides as if he was restraining himself from reaching for her, fighting against what he wanted. In London, when you defended me to those women, when you told them that you were proud to be my Duchess, did you mean it? Or were you simply performing the role we agreed upon, playing the part? I meant every word. She reached up, her small hand touching his face with trembling fingers, feeling the warmth of his skin, the slight roughness of stubble along his strong jaw. Alexander, I have spent my entire life being what others needed me to be, dutiful daughter, proper lady, convenient solution to your practical problem. But somewhere in these past months, in this wild, beautiful place with you, I have become someone new, someone authentic and real, and that woman loves you with her whole heart. He went absolutely still, his dark eyes searching hers with desperate intensity. You cannot. We agreed this would not happen. We had rules. We agreed to a practical arrangement. We agreed to mutual benefit without romantic delusion. She smiled through tears that streamed freely down her cheeks. But love is not a delusion, Alexander. It is the most real thing I have ever felt, the truest thing I know, and I hope that you feel it too. I am terrified to feel it. His large hands came up to cradle her face, his touch achingly gentle despite their strength, his thumbs brushing away her tears. Cecilia destroyed me. She taught me that love was a weapon, that trust was foolishness, that opening your heart meant giving someone the power to destroy you. I built walls so high and thick that I thought nothing could breach them, nothing could get through. And then you arrived, with your quiet strength and your perceptive eyes, and your refusal to be diminished. You dismantled my defenses brick by brick without even trying, without even knowing what you were doing. I was trying, she admitted, her voice breaking with emotion. Not deliberately at first, but then I wanted you to see me, the real me, not the performance, not the plain, desperate woman in a marriage of convenience, but who I truly was, beneath all that pretense. And I wanted to see the real you, past all the coldness and control. And what did you see? The question was vulnerable, almost childlike, his handsome face open in a way she had never witnessed before. I saw a man who reads love poetry in secret, who chose these rooms for me because the sea sounds like freedom, who keeps his promises even when they cost him dearly, who protects what he values with fierce loyalty, who is capable of immense feeling but terrified to show it because once upon a time someone proved themselves unworthy of that precious gift. She pressed closer, her forehead against his, breathing in his scent, leather and books, and something uniquely him. I saw a man worthy of love, deserving of love. My love. Evangeline! His voice broke on her name, his control finally shattering like glass. I do not deserve you, do not deserve this gift you offer. You deserve everything. And I am offering it freely, without obligation, without expectation of anything in return. If you cannot love me back, I will not leave. I will honor our arrangement. But I had to tell you the truth, because you taught me that honesty is the foundation of anything real, anything that lasts. For a long moment he simply held her face in his large hands, his dark eyes searching hers as if memorizing every detail, the soft brown of her hair, the delicate structure of her features, the love shining openly in her hazel eyes. Then, slowly, reverently, he lowered his head and kissed her. It was not the chaste kiss of a contract marriage or the passionate embrace of romance novels. It was something more profound, a conversation without words, a promise, a homecoming. His lips against hers held years of loneliness finally ending, walls finally crumbling, a heart finally willing to risk everything again. She melted against his broad chest, her small frame fitting perfectly against his larger one, and kissed him back with all the love she'd been holding inside for weeks. When they finally broke apart, both were trembling, breathing hard, foreheads pressed together. I love you, he said, the words emerging as if dragged from somewhere deep and hidden, his voice raw with emotion and vulnerability. I have loved you for weeks, perhaps months, but I was too much a coward to admit it, too afraid of being hurt again. You walk into rooms, and they become brighter. You speak, and I want to hear every word. You challenged Lady Ashworth on my behalf, and I wanted to ride to London immediately, and— He laughed shakily, his hands still cradling her face. I do not even know what I wanted to do. Shout it from rooftops. Tell everyone that you are mine, and I am impossibly, inexplicably yours. Then tell them, Evangeline smiled through happy tears, her hands clutching the front of his shirt. Tell the whole world if you wish. I am not ashamed of loving you. I am proud of it. The world will say we are mad. A duke and a woman he married out of practical necessity, claiming to have found true love in such unlikely circumstances. Let them say it. We know the truth. She took his hand, laced their fingers together, marveling at how his larger hand engulfed hers. How perfectly they fit. We began with honesty about our circumstances, we built respect through shared efforts, and we discovered love because we were brave enough to be authentic with each other. That is not madness, that is miracle. A commotion in the hallway interrupted them. Raised voices, a woman's shrill protests, familiar and unwelcome. I demand to see the Duke. I have rights. I have claims on him. Cecilia burst into the library, wild-eyed and disheveled, clearly having forced her way past the servants. Her golden curls were messy, her beautiful face twisted with desperation and rage. She stopped short at the sight of Alexander and Evangeline standing together in an intimate embrace, their love evident in every line of their bodies. In the way his arms wrapped protectively around her small frame, in the way she leaned into him with absolute trust. No! Cecilia's voice was poisonous, venomous, her blue eyes blazing with fury and jealousy. No, this is not possible. He cannot possibly love you. Look at you. You're nothing. Plain, unremarkable, utterly ordinary. He deserves beauty. He deserves me. But he does love me. Evangeline faced her without fear, drawing strength from Alexander's presence, from his arms still holding her close. And I love him. Whatever power you once held over him is gone, Lady Cecilia, vanished like morning mist. He has moved past the pain you caused. We both have. You have no place in our lives or our hearts. I came to warn you, Cecilia spat, turning her venomous gaze to Alexander, her beautiful face ugly with malice and desperation. I have evidence, letters, documents, things that prove your father engaged in questionable business dealings, illegal things. I will take them to every newspaper in London unless you send her away and take me back, unless you give me what I deserve. Unless I what? Alexander's voice was cold and final, his tall frame radiating controlled power. Pay you, divorce my wife, and marry you instead. Cecilia, you mistake the situation entirely. I do not care about my father's ancient scandals. I do not care about society's opinion or what they think. The only thing I care about is standing in this room with my wife, the woman I love, and building a life based on truth rather than fear, on love rather than pretense. He moved forward, one arm still around Evangeline, his presence commanding and absolute. You have nothing, no power, no leverage, no hold over me whatsoever. My wife has taught me that reputation built on lies is worthless, but integrity built on honesty is unbreakable. Publish your documents if you wish. Spread your gossip to every corner of London. I will not flinch from it, and neither will she. Evangeline stepped beside him, unified, her small frame somehow matching his authority. We have each other, Lady Cecilia. We have honest love built on truth and respect. What do you have? What do you possess besides empty beauty and a mercenary heart? The question hung in the air like a sword waiting to fall. Cecilia looked between them, her beautiful face crumpling as she saw clearly for the first time that she had lost whatever fantasy she had nursed, that Alexander would always pine for her beauty, that she could return whenever she wished and reclaim him, lay shattered at her feet like broken glass. You deserve each other, she said finally, her voice hollow, all her beauty unable to hide her emptiness. Two naive fools playing at happiness, playing house like children. Perhaps we are fools, Alexander agreed, pulling Evangeline closer against his side. But we are happy fools, and that is more than you will ever be, more than you can even comprehend. This time when Cecilia left, stumbling out in tears and fury and defeat, it was clear she would never return. The past had been faced and dismissed, confronted and conquered. The future lay open before them, unknown and uncertain, but theirs to shape together. Alexander turned to Evangeline, his dark eyes burning with intensity, and pulled her fully into his arms. I choose you, he said firmly, his deep voice resonant with conviction and certainty. I choose uncertain future with true partnership over comfortable convention. I choose love over fear. I choose us over everything else. As do I. She rose on her toes to kiss him again, pouring all her love into the gesture, all her hope and joy. Now and always, forever. The storm outside raged on, but inside the library, two people who had begun as strangers in a contract marriage stood together as husband and wife, partners and lovers, choosing each other with absolute certainty. The practical arrangement had become a love story after all, the most beautiful love story of all. 6 months later, the gardens at Ravenscar had been transformed. What had once been formal, austere hedges and regimented flower beds now burst with riotous color and wild beauty. Roses climbed the castle walls in cascades of red and pink and white. Lavender spilled over pathways, filling the air with its sweet, calming scent. A fountain Evangeline had commissioned gurgled cheerfully at the center of it all, its water catching the sunlight like scattered diamonds. She walked through the garden in the golden light of late afternoon, her hand resting on the small swell of her belly where new life grew. Her dress was a flowing creation of soft blue silk that accommodated her changing figure with grace and comfort. Her brown hair hung loose around her shoulders in a style Alexander loved, soft waves catching the breeze. She looked different now, her face fuller, her skin glowing with health and happiness. Her hazel eyes bright with confidence and joy. The uncertain, pale creature who had arrived veiled and hidden had blossomed into a woman comfortable in her own skin, proud of who she had become. Behind her, the castle rose like something from a fairy tale, but no longer forbidding or cold. Now it looked like home, warm and welcoming, its windows glowing with light and life and laughter. She found Alexander exactly where she expected, in the small clearing overlooking the sea, reading in the dappled shade of an old oak tree. He looked up at her approach, and the smile that transformed his handsome face still had the power to steal her breath. His dark eyes lit with pure joy, the kind of happiness that comes from deep within. The severe lines around his mouth softened into warmth and tenderness. "You're supposed to be resting," he chided gently, rising to offer her his chair, his large hands reaching out to steady her with infinite care. "I'm pregnant, not fragile or made of glass." But she settled into the seat gratefully, and he immediately knelt beside her. His hand joined hers on her belly, his long fingers splayed protectively over their child, over their future taking form. "Were you reading the poetry again?" "Browning." He held up the worn volume, the same one he had shown her all those months ago when they were still strangers learning each other, still finding their way. "How do I love thee? Let me count the ways. I find I understand it differently now. It means something new." "Oh?" She ran her fingers through his dark hair, still marveling at the casual intimacy between them, at how his eyes closed briefly at her touch, savoring it. "Before, I thought it presumptuous. How dare someone count and measure love so confidently, so boldly? But now I realize it is not arrogance or presumption. It is gratitude, the need to catalogue and acknowledge every way that love has transformed one's existence, changed everything about how you see the world." He pressed a kiss to her palm, his lips warm against her skin. "Shall I count the ways I love you?" "Please do," she smiled, content and at peace, in a way she had never imagined possible. "I love the way you reorganized the household accounts and increased efficiency by 20%. I love how you insisted on establishing a school for the tenants' children and how you personally teach them twice a week. I love that you refused to let Mrs. Blackwell serve mutton 4 nights in a row simply because it was traditional." He laughed softly, the sound rich and unguarded and free. "I love how you challenge me, support me, see me, truly see me past every defense and wall I built. That's only 4 ways. The poem has many more. I love you to the depth and breadth and height my soul can reach," he quoted, looking up at her with eyes full of wonder, his handsome face open and vulnerable and utterly hers. "I love you with a love I seem to lose with my lost saints, though I know now I never truly loved before you. I love you with the breath, smiles, tears of all my life. I love your quiet strength that announces itself through action, not words. I love how you stand taller now, how your eyes hold certainty they never had before. I love that you see your own beauty at last, that you believe in your own worth." Evangeline blinked back tears of joy. Who knew the feared Duke of Ravenscar was a romantic hiding beneath all that severity? "Only you. My secret is safe in your keeping." He rose, pulling her gently to her feet and into his embrace, his strong arms wrapping around her protectively. "Do you remember the ball where we first met, where this all began?" "How could I forget? You stood by that pillar, looking so composed, so carefully controlled, hiding all your desperation and fear behind a perfect mask." "I was terrified of everything. Poverty, scandal, the future stretching endlessly ahead, and then you looked at me with those intense eyes, and I thought I was being dissected by winter itself, cut open and examined." "I was memorizing you," he admitted, his hand coming up to cup her face tenderly. "Trying to understand why, out of all the women in that ballroom, dressed in their finery and jewels, I could not look away from the one who was trying so hard to be invisible, to disappear into the background. Even then, some part of me recognized what you would become to me, what we would become together." "And what did you see when you first looked at me?" "Strength masquerading as submission, intelligence hidden behind propriety and careful manners, a diamond covered in dust, exactly as I told you." He cupped her face tenderly, his thumbs stroking her cheeks with infinite gentleness. I told myself I chose you for practical reasons, because you were desperate and would agree to my terms without complaint. But I think, even then, some part of me recognized what you would become to me, my partner, my equal, my love. Evangeline glanced back at the castle, at the gardens they had created together, at the life they were building with their own hands. If someone had told me then that within a year I would be standing here, happy, loved, carrying your child, having discovered strengths I never knew I possessed, I would not have believed them. I thought I was trading my dreams for survival, selling myself for security. If someone had told me I would love again, trust again, open myself to the possibility of pain again, I would have called them mad, delusional. He kissed her softly, lingering, savoring. And yet here we are, two people who signed a contract expecting nothing but finding everything, finding a whole world we never knew existed. A servant appeared at the garden entrance. Your Grace, your sisters have arrived for their visit. Already? Evangeline laughed with delight, her face lighting up. Send them out here, please. Moments later, Caroline, Beatrice, and young Margaret came tumbling through the garden like puppies freed from confinement, exclaiming over the flowers and the view and their sister's glowing appearance. All three had bloomed under Evangeline's care and Alexander's generous support, Caroline about to make her debut, pretty and confident with numerous suitors already calling, Beatrice showing real artistic talent that Alexander was encouraging with private tutors and art supplies, Margaret simply happy and secure, no longer worried about where the next meal would come from or whether they would have a home tomorrow. Look at you! Caroline embraced her sister carefully, mindful of the baby. Glowing like a sunset. Like a star, marriage suits you, Evie. True marriage, not the practical arrangement you thought you were entering. Love suits me, Evangeline corrected, smiling at Alexander, whose dark eyes followed her every movement with devotion and adoration. There is a difference, a profound difference. As her sisters explored the gardens, chattering about London gossip and the upcoming season, Alexander pulled Evangeline aside, his large hands gentle on her waist. Your mother wrote, he said quietly. She is coming for an extended visit. She wants to be here for the birth of her first grandchild. You arranged that, didn't you? I may have suggested our physician believes the sea air would benefit her recovery, speed her healing. His expression was innocently bland, but his eyes sparkled with mischief and warmth. You are managing my entire family's happiness, taking care of all of them. Our family, he corrected, his hand moving to rest on her belly again, on their child growing strong and healthy. And is it so wrong to want the people you love to be cared for, to be safe and happy? She kissed him in answer, pouring all her gratitude and love into the gesture, all her joy. When they finally broke apart, Beatrice was making exaggerated gagging sounds, while Caroline laughed and Margaret giggled behind her hands. You too, Caroline declared, utterly nauseating and utterly enviable at the same time. That evening after dinner, the household gathered in the drawing room, a new tradition Evangeline had established. No longer did the Duke isolate himself in his study, while servants kept to their quarters in separate worlds. Now they shared music, conversation, laughter. Mrs. Blackwell had revealed an unexpected talent for card games. The butler told remarkably funny stories about his youth. Even the youngest scullery maid was encouraged to practice her reading aloud, her voice growing stronger each week. It was informal, unconventional, and absolutely scandalous by society's rigid standards. It was also the happiest household in all of Northumberland, perhaps in all of England. Later, as they prepared for bed, Alexander pulled Evangeline into his arms by the window overlooking the sea. The waves crashed in their eternal rhythm, the sound that had welcomed her to this place and now lulled her to sleep each night. His hands rested on her waist, his tall frame curved protectively around her smaller one. Are you happy? He asked. The question vulnerable despite everything they had shared, despite the obvious answer written in every smile and touch, profoundly, completely, overwhelmingly happy. She turned in his embrace to face him, her small hands coming up to rest on his broad chest, feeling his heart beat steady and strong. Are you? I did not know happiness like this existed in the world. He pressed his forehead to hers, his dark eyes closing briefly. I thought contentment was the best one could hope for. Absence of pain rather than presence of joy. You have taught me differently. You have taught me that opening one's heart, despite the risk, despite the fear of being hurt, is the only way to truly live, to be fully alive. We taught each other, she corrected gently. You showed me I was stronger than I believed. I showed you that you were worthy of love. Together we created something neither of us could have achieved alone. A partnership of equals. A partnership of equals who also happened to be madly in love. He laughed, the sound free and genuine, his handsome face transformed by joy and peace. Society still talks about us, you know. The Duke who married a nobody and actually fell in love with her. We are considered either dangerously radical or utterly delusional. Let them talk. We know the truth. And what is the truth, my brilliant, beautiful Duchess? My wife, my love, my everything? Evangeline smiled, her hand covering his over her belly where their child grew, their future taking form. The truth is that sometimes the most practical arrangements lead to the most impractical emotions. That sometimes what appears to be an ending is actually a beginning. That love, when it is honest and brave and true, can transform everything it touches, everything. She paused, looking out at the sea, the wild, free sea that had become her symbol of liberation and possibility. The truth is that I came to this castle believing I was sacrificing my dreams for security, trading hope for survival, but I discovered that my dreams were too small, too shaped by others' expectations and limitations. The reality of love, of partnership, of discovering my authentic self, it is more extraordinary than any fantasy I could have imagined, more beautiful than any story. She turned to face the window, as if speaking not just to Alexander, but to everyone watching, everyone listening, everyone who had ever felt trapped or unworthy or afraid. But I want people to know that transformation is possible, that love, real love, not the fairy tale kind, but the honest, complicated, challenging kind, can find you in the most unexpected places, that the arranged marriage, the practical solution, the choice made from desperation rather than desire can become the greatest blessing of your life if you have the courage to be authentic, to risk vulnerability, to choose truth over performance every single day. She looked at Alexander, her eyes shining with love and gratitude and wonder. I want them to know that the feared Duke was never the monster society imagined, that his cold exterior protected a heart capable of profound feeling and tremendous love. And the woman he married, plain and poor and powerless in society's eyes, was never those things at all. She was always strong, always beautiful in her own way. She simply needed to believe it herself. We needed to see each other clearly, past all the facades and fears and walls we built. And now, Alexander prompted softly, his arms tightening around her, now we choose each other every day, not because a contract binds us, but because love frees us. We have built something real and true and ours. She reached up to touch his face, her fingers tracing the strong line of his jaw. We began as strangers in a business arrangement. You thought you were marrying a desperate nobody. I thought I was selling myself for security. But we discovered that honesty creates space for love to grow, that respect can bloom into passion, that the most unexpected partnerships can become the deepest connections imaginable. Alexander kissed her then, deep and lingering. A kiss that held promise and passion and the profound comfort of coming home. When they finally parted, both were smiling through tears. To think, he murmured against her lips, I once believed I was incapable of this, that my heart was too damaged, too scarred to ever love again. To think, she countered, I once believed I was unworthy of it, that I was too plain, too poor, too ordinary to ever be truly seen and valued and loved. We were both wrong. Wonderfully, gloriously wrong. They stood together at the window, looking out over the wild sea and the wild garden and the wild, beautiful life they had created together with their own hands. A life that had begun with a cold arrangement, a feared duke and a desperate woman, both hiding behind carefully constructed facades. A life that had bloomed into profound love, because they had chosen honesty over pretense, vulnerability over protection, authentic connection over safe distance and isolation. Behind them, Ravenscar Castle stood strong against the night, no longer a prison or a monument to loneliness, but a home filled with warmth and laughter and love. A place where two people who had thought themselves beyond love had discovered it in the most unlikely of circumstances, where a man known for his cold severity had revealed depths of tenderness and devotion, where a woman dismissed as plain and unremarkable had discovered her own radiant strength and beauty. And in the morning, the sea would crash against the cliffs as it always did, eternal and relentless and free. But now its song sounded like celebration rather than warning. But it sounded like freedom and possibility. It sounded like love. It sounded like home. It sounded like everything they had found together, everything they had become together, everything they would continue to build together for all the years to come. The practical arrangement had become the greatest love story of all, and they would live it together, day by day, choice by choice, forever.